Hello, and welcome to our mock live class today. My name is Kate Deering. I am an assistant director for recruitment and admissions here with online programs at the Geese College of Business. And I look forward to spending the next hour with you. Our time today will be spent providing you with an opportunity to understand how live lectures are delivered and have a chance to interact with this high engagement component of Geese Online coursework. Since many of you may be new to Geese and what credentials are available, I wanted to give you just a quick overview before we get started today. We offer 3 online master's degree programs, the IMBA, the IMSA, and the IMSM, as well as 5 graduate certificates with more soon to come. Geese online graduate level programs are innovative, they're affordable, and they're designed to be fully online to offer flexibility and access for full-time working professionals. Today, you will experience a webinar from 2 of our talented faculty members and be able to get a glimpse into what kind of content is shared within Geese. Our courses balance foundational material shared on the Coursera platform with an interactive high engagement component as well. The high engagement component includes a 90-minute live class each week and many other facets to learning like group projects, office hours, networking, and being part of a great university like Illinois. Since we don't have time today to chat about our credentials, I'm going to share this QR code included on this first screen. If you'd like to speak with myself or an admissions counselor to discuss your goals and which program is right for you, I would love to connect. Just scan this QR code with your camera and we'll give you a link to fill out a short form. So before we get started learning about leadership as empowerment and knowing yourself in the process, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. I see some of you have your cameras turned on. Thank you so much. I really encourage all of you to turn your cameras on so that we can see all of your wonderful faces here today and really be able to interact as if this was a real live weekly class. Please note that you are all muted in order to minimize background noise during this class. There may be moments when Professor Keating or Professor Luckman invite you to participate, and our technical team will unmute your microphone for you. If you have questions, please use the raise hand feature and we will call on you. We will have one breakout session during our time today, which will allow you to participate with your fellow session attendees. And lastly, we invite you to feel comfortable participating in the chat. Feel free to interact with the professors and other attendees regarding the live class material. If you have specific program questions, save those for a direct email or that QR code that is on the screen. I'm very excited to have 2 of our top leaders within Geese Business teaching us today. In this mock class, we will explore the concept of leadership as a social process of empowering others. Professors Keating and Luckman will highlight the key competencies that leaders can develop to succeed in today's business environment, while also advancing the notion that effective leadership starts with the self. Kari Keating is an award-winning educator who joined the Geese College of Business faculty in 2020, where she teaches courses in leadership, teamwork, and business in action. Kari's work is focused on helping learners develop their leadership capacity as emotionally intelligent changemakers in organizations and communities. Prior to Geese, Kari served as a director on the campus-wide minor in leadership studies in the College of Aces at Illinois. She holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from Bradley University and a master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Iowa. And lastly, a PhD in human and community development from the University of Illinois. Elizabeth Luckman is an accomplished educator and coach with a drive for helping others to thrive in their professional lives. She currently works as a clinical assistant professor in business administration at the Geese College of Business, where she teaches courses at both the graduate and undergraduate levels on leadership, effective teamwork, and business operations. She serves as the academic director of the undergraduate management major and is also a fellow of the Disruption Lab, which seeks to understand the relationship between technology and education. Prior to her faculty role, she served as the lead postdoctoral fellow at the National Center for Principled Leadership and Research Ethics at the Granger College of Engineering. Before academia, she spent a decade in luxury retail industry, including buying, merchandising, planning, and managerial positions. She holds a bachelor's degree in English literature and classic civilizations from Wellesley College, an MBA from the Fisher College of Business at The Ohio State University, and a PhD from Olin School of Business at Washington University in St. Louis. So as you all can see, you are in great hands for this mock live class, and we're so excited for you to be able to get a glimpse into what GEASE is all about. With that, I am going to turn it over to Professor Keating and Professor Luckman.
Well, thank you, Kate, and welcome everyone from all over the world.
Yes, from really all over.
Thank you. Hello, Aya in Egypt, and Rodrigo in Sao Paulo, folks from right here in Illinois and from across the U.S. Thank you for joining us. This is already a great representation of the kind of students that we have in our live class.
Yes, and it's really great to see so many people joining in to learn more about what's going on today. Thank you, Kate, for that lovely introduction. Professor Keating and I are very happy to be here with you all today to walk you through and give you a little bit of an idea about what these live sessions look like in our program.
Yes, and just to let you know, we're sitting here in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, where it's finally sunny, and it's the last day of classes around here, and so there's a certain, mood in the air of celebration, and I saw just yesterday my first cap and gown sighting, where
that's always exciting.
It is. Yeah. People taking pictures, so there's just a nice spirit around campus.
Spring
right
fever.
Now. That's it. Yeah. Yes. All right. So I'm going to provide us with a little bit of an agenda of where we're headed over the next hour. And this feels like the way you would experience a regular weekly live session with us. So we start with a quick introduction. We're going to ask you to interact with us by means of a couple of poll questions. So if you're familiar with Zoom polling, we're going to then give you a contemporary definition of leadership. We will then give you a chance to discuss with your peers a specific prompt. So be ready to have your camera on and chat with peers to analyze and respond to a discussion question. We'll come back and we'll hit a couple more sort of chunks of theory and content. We'll ask you another poll question, and then we'll wrap up by asking you to maybe give us some questions in the chat. So we try to keep things moving and interactive. So we get excited from your energy. So this, dropping things in the chat, discussions with each other and with us are what we expect. So,
and I'll add to that I think one of the biggest elements of value that comes from our programming is not just the professors and the content and the MOOCs, but the network you can create with each other. So again, you can see people come from all over the world, but people come from all different industries, all different background. We have students that are 25 and students that are 75. We have people who are career switchers. We have people who have no idea what they want to do next in their lives, and people who are very focused and dedicated on getting to a next step. And so connecting with your peers, and like Professor Keating said, we're going to give you an opportunity to do that, is a huge element of this program.
I think I'm glad you brought that up, and that will sort of lead us into our first poll question here in just a moment. So Nicola, thank you for launching our poll. So we'd like to get a sense of who's here and why you're here, why you chose to join this mock live session about leadership and empowerment. Is it maybe that you've been in a management role for a while and seek to sharpen your skills? Or did you just start in a leadership role and maybe you need some knowledge around that? Perhaps you're looking to emerge in a leadership role in the organization where you sit now. And then as a lot of folks we know our iDegrees program and folks who come to our class, they may be in a transition phase. Maybe you're in between jobs or just graduated from school and you're looking for some inspiration and direction. Or perhaps you were just curious about this whole thing at GEASE and what iDegrees are all about. You just wanted to get a taste. So
I'm responding to a couple of things in the chat. In the meantime, I see we've got some answers coming in here on the poll, and it looks like we're fairly split. By the way, if you chose other, please share in the chat what your other reason is. This is a really important piece of this class because the leadership and teams class that we teach is one of the core classes. It's one of the first classes people often take. And it's really important to know why you're here. right? Just think about that in general. It's really easy to say, I need to go get a degree. I'm just going to go and I'm going to plow through. But you get so much more out of each class if you can connect it to some purpose for yourself. And so we'll go ahead here and close out. I think, Nicola, if you would close out for us, please. And let's see what we've got.
Share some results.
So it looks like we're evenly split between been in a management role for a while, wanting to emerge as a leader, and curious, curious. It's our favorite word.
It is.
We love the word curious. You'll hear us say that all the time. And I want to point out something here too. So this is really interesting to see the diversity. We're going to talk a little bit more about this shortly, but leadership, we often think of as a particular role, right? I'm a vice president, I'm a director, but actually leadership is so much bigger than that. I was watching the news this morning. There was this terrible pileup accident in Southern Illinois yesterday.
From here.
Yeah. And so I was watching the press conference about it this morning, and I noticed the chief of police who was talking about it said, he talked about his team as leaders. He said, these are the people they were leaders yesterday. They went out to solve this problem. They went out to help people. And I thought that's a great example of how we think about leadership, which is someone who steps up, takes responsibility, and solves some sort of problem, right? So when we talk about leadership, we know there are specific leadership roles, and we're going to talk about that, but also we want to think about leadership in the broadest context as well.
And what we are, speaking of the news, I think about how we could pitch a leadership class and what some people might expect from a leadership class to be talking about, the big issues of the day, there's banking crises and political upheaval, and there's the climate crisis. I mean, we could be talking about it from
now you're overwhelming me.
I know. But here's my relief. It starts with the self.
Absolutely.
Like, all of these wicked problems, in terms of leadership, start with a fundamental understanding of who we are, because as we'll see, that who we are is how we lead. So this is the way that our entire course is pitched, from the lens of the self as sort of the unit of analysis.
Yes, and there are multiple classes on leadership that you would get inside of the iDegrees program. So just to give you an example, this is our leadership and teams class. The next class sort of in the series is about designing organizations. And so it's looking at leadership from more of an organizational level. And then we have a strategy class. So that's leading from a strategic perspective. And we're very intentional about how we design these classes. And so back to this idea of the unit of the self, it also is really fun because you can be anywhere in your career and this is relevant to you. And it can be applied today, which is what we hope that people take away from the classes we teach.
That's right. So thank you for the answers on the poll. You can get a sense of the different reasons that folks are here. So where we'd like to head to next, we mentioned this concept of leadership, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we'd like you to respond to this question in the chat. Sort of what first comes to your mind when you think of the concept of leadership? And just as you are all weighing in the chat and telling us what comes to mind when you think of the concept of leadership, this concept has been studied for more than 100 years. Theories sort of over the last century or so have moved from a trait approach to leadership to a skills model to behavioral theories to leadership as showing up depending on the developmental level of the followers, or situational models, leader-member exchange, transformational leadership. You can just about see the airport bookshelf, when you go by the gift store at the airport, the different sorts of books that are there. But we wanted to get a sense of your pulse of what you're thinking of. And then we're about to present you with a contemporary definition of the concept. So there's
some really great comments here, and they're flying by really fast. So this is always one of the challenges of the chat in Zoom rooms, as most of you probably know. But I'm seeing everything from guiding. I see the word communication. I see delegation. I see trust and influence.
Yay,
I see
Rachel.
Trust. By the way, I scrolled by Chelsea Doman. Hi, Chelsea. Chelsea was in our class a while back, so I just wanted to say hello to her. I know. I was like, I know that name. So
I love
personal.
Michelle. Show the people the light. That's interesting.
Yes. Personal experience, growth. So this is also really indicative of why leadership sometimes is really challenging, right? Because it means a lot of different things to different people and different things to us at different times, right? So what leadership meant to me when I was coming out of college is very different than what leadership necessarily means to me now when I'm trying to help others become better leaders. So let's take a look at, we'll give you a definition. And I always like to frame this by saying, I don't believe there's one magical definition of leadership, but for me, the reason that I'm even interested in this concept to begin with is about personal growth. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves and developing the skills of leaders along the way. And by the way, a lot of those skills, it's about developing character. It's about living into our virtues. It's about understanding our values. So if you'll take me to the next slide, we'll give you a leadership definition here that is rooted in how you can grow using this definition. So leadership is a socially constructed process in which an individual is either given or takes increased responsibility or accountability in empowering others to collectively solve problems in alignment with an organization's or a team's purpose. Okay, that's a lot of words. That's a whole lot of words. But the reason that the definition is set up this way is because if we break it into pieces, we can think about different skill sets we can be developing and practicing as leaders. Socially constructed. So leadership is not just the role you take on. It emerges from the context you're in, the culture you're in. Whether people see you as a leader has to do with our own biases and our stereotypes, has to do with whether you're in a formal role or not. So that kind of sets the stage. Given or takes increased responsibility or accountability, like the example of these police officers going out to solve problems yesterday, just stepping up and modeling the behavior you want to see in others is leadership. That can be given to you through a formal role. You can take it. You can take that responsibility working in teams or working with other folks. Empowering others. At the end of the day, leaders don't do so much as they facilitate, right? A leader who thinks that they have to do everything is going to find themselves completely overwhelmed. A leader who connects with people and helps them become the best version of themselves is a really effective leader. And finally, it's really all about solving problems. And we have to do that knowing where we're going and why we're going there, which is why it's connected to purpose. So again, not the only definition of leadership in the world, but rather one that allows us to say, this is an area where I can grow and develop. This is an area where I can practice. And so we pose the question on here, which words or phrases right now are landing with you? What do you want to work on? What is coming up for you as a particular challenge you're facing? How could you think about, I'm going to work on and grow one habit this next week, and it's from this particular area of the definition?
You know, one question we often like to ask our learners when we pop up the definition of leadership is, what if you had a highlighter, what phrase or couple of words would you highlight because you wish that other people in your organization understood it sort of this way? And so you feel free to tell us in the chat if you had a highlighter, what
I
you would highlight.
I like what you just said there, so I asked the question about what do you want to work on, but another question is, what's your boss need to do? Because that's usually what everybody wants to talk about, right? Is I'm okay, but my boss is terrible at this, and that's great. That actually teaches us a lot of empowering others. Another way to say that is making sure that the right people can solve the right problems at the right time with the right tools. Right. So when we think about, I see the word delegating a lot, and I struggle with that word a little bit because delegation assumes I have the answers and I'm going to tell you what to do. But really what it means is there's a problem to solve and Professor Keating has all the right tools and is the one responsible for it. So how can I make her job easier? So I love that that's coming up for folks.
Lubov, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but you had a word that you wanted to add in, which is example. Which I feel like that is modeling the way, which reminds me of Kouzes and Posner and their, the 5 practices of leadership. And one of those is model the way or be an example or what we might call lead through using referent power. So thank you, Lubov, for adding that in.
That makes me think of another example. So I'm teaching this class, a very small class this semester with undergraduate honor students, and we're talking about leadership through all these different lenses. And we spent an entire week talking about the words visionary, inspirational, example, model. And so lots of the examples that were coming up, like let's say Jennifer Doudna, who was the woman who's credited with the CRISPR editing gene tool. And we're talking about, well, is she a leader because she doesn't, lead a company, but she leads a lab, but she actually went into industry and then she stepped back to do her science, to focus more on the science, but she's leading in the sense that she's changing the way we're thinking about things, right? So leadership can mean the examples, the models, being a visionary, being inspirational as well. And I like that piece too. Again, add to this definition, add the things that are relevant to you as well.
So I think we're coming to the part in class where it's time for you all to do some work. So you will notice that in just a moment in the chat, you'll be able to download a file. There's the link. Kate, thank you so much. You'll be able to download a file that will give you this definition, so you can take this with you, and then this prompt. And I'll just go over the prompt really quickly, and we'll ask you to discuss with your peers your response to this. So first of all, just a quick norm when we go into breakout rooms in this type of a class. Please turn your camera on and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves sort of around the Zoom screen. So give everyone a moment and then take a look at the prompt. So we're asking, as a group, discuss an example of what you consider to be an effective leader. What do we mean by effective? Well, we want you all to discuss, what do you mean by effective? And give an example of a leader who you believe is effective. And then on the flip side, can you give an example of what you feel is an ineffective leader? And then some reason, some justification around why you believe that person is ineffective. And you can take examples from your real life, of course, protect some of the names, I suppose, in your company, but examples from real life, examples from pop culture, movies, books, things that you've consumed recently, or any other organizational context. And when you come back from your breakout discussion, we will ask for a show of hands for folks to report out. So what did you share? What were some of the, as we like to call the one big nugget that came out of your breakout discussion? So be ready to interact with us when you come back, but for sure be ready to interact with each other.
We're going to give you 8 minutes, and we'll see you back here in 8 minutes.
Welcome back from your breakout discussions. When in a regular class time, we often hear students tell us that we sort of pulled them out mid-conversation and that there's never enough time to chat. So just to put that breakout discussion in perspective, in a typical live class, we will offer 2 times to break out and have discussions with peers and come back and unpack things with professors. So you would normally experience 2 of these breakout sessions. So let's get to the part where we can have an interactive chat together about this particular prompt. We asked you to talk about an example of an effective leader, an example of an ineffective leader, and why you assessed those folks as effective or ineffective. So we're going to ask you to, anyone, raise your hand, use your reaction button to raise a hand if you would like to report out just a minute or so about what happened in your breakout room, some examples that you discussed, and that way everyone will get a chance to hear. And it looks like on my screen, Jeffrey Burrows would like to report out from the breakout.
How's it going? One of the things that came up for us specifically with ineffective leaders was the concept of toxicity.
Okay.
And how somebody could have a great idea, maybe even be a good communicator and set a good plan, but if they don't take the time and the effort to really make their team members feel valued and appreciated and really include them in the process of creating whatever it is that's being created, eventually that will lead to resentment and lower morale and ultimately a worse end result.
Thank you for bringing that up, Jeffrey. I know you used that sort of T word in the beginning, toxicity. So yeah. I'm wondering if the folks in your group talked a little bit about maybe experience with that, or what can lead to that notion of toxicity.
Sure. In our group, we talked a lot about micromanaging, which really for the people in our group came down to the idea of not feeling like their leader trusted them to do the work that the leader asked them to do.
Word.
There it is. The other T word.
The other T word.
Antithesis, right?
Something I really love about this example, and I appreciate it, is for me, it always raises the question of how does a leader truly view the people that work with them? And how do you view the people that work with you? And I love that you brought up this word trust, because I think a lot of times we don't inherently trust for a variety of reasons. Maybe someone has demonstrated that maybe it doesn't feel like they're as trustworthy, or maybe you just haven't taken the time to get to know them. I hear a lot of these conversations, and I always ask the question, like, do you really believe that the people who work with you are bringing value? Because if you don't think they're valuable, they're going to know you don't think they're valuable. So part of it is starting with yourself and understanding what your relationship is. And if you don't, sit down and have a conversation and say, what is it that each of us brings to the table?
Yeah, which is precisely why we wanted to focus on self-awareness in this live session for you. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for bringing up some of the hard topics right off the bat. Let's move next to Irit. Hi, Irit.
Oops, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting because the little window popped up. So I had a really wonderful group. We were quite diverse in where we were from. We had a representative from China and a representative from Brazil, which always makes things so much more interesting, although today he's in Argentina. Anyway, we had a little trouble with the effective leader, and I think that between Chelsea and Casio, and Chelsea's one of your students, they sort of put their finger on the point, which is that an effective leader our definition might vary depending on who we are. And the best, most effective leaders are the ones who are going to know how to reach a variety of people and motivate and inspire them to do their best work. And Casio specifically mentioned the former president of Uruguay, who realized that he was in a very poor country and getting a $15,000 a month salary seemed a bit excessive, and decided to forego his salary and move out of the expensive sort of president's mansion and instead live more like his people, which helped gain their trust, one presumes. When we were talking about ineffective leaders, the theme was that these are people where their employees have lost trust in them. So again, we're back to that T word. And I just wanted to share how we looped back to that same point. Thank you.
Irit, thank you so much for sharing that and for having such a rich conversation in 8 minutes with perfect strangers, I assume. And that's such a wonderful example of what happens in these classes and in these live sessions, is that you get a culturally rich understanding of the material because of the folks who are in the class. So that is really highlighted here. And again, we're back to this example of trust. And I'm wondering, as I listen to you, Irit, and tell the stories, and I'm wondering if this was true for many of you, was it easier to define an ineffective leader or to identify, something when it's not there, when there's this lack of trust, this lack of empowerment, this lack of inclusion and respect, than it is to find it, the gem when we see it. So thank you, Irit, for sharing that. I'm wondering, do we have time for more?
Yeah.
We get going. We want to talk to everyone.
Yep. No, we got time. Let's hear from somebody else.
Let's hear from Shalindra. And please help me pronounce your name if I'm mispronouncing it.
Yeah, it is correct, Shailendra. So
Nice to see you.
nice to see you as well. So it is very nice class, and I had a conversation with one of the person from New York, and he has been the a student of University of Illinois already for 5 years. So we had discussion about the effective leader and ineffective leader. Then we came to know on the conclusion that effective leader will exhibit the core values. So core values could be the professionalism, the perseverance, the trust, respect. So all these core values will be part of an effective leader, and he will empower the person. He will not be the only focusing towards the goal completion. He will also empower the person to develop himself, to grow in his life, and he will also take care of his personal life, because sometimes you may see the issue with the leaders okay, they are not good in giving the leaves and all. So they do not take care of the personal problems the person may be facing at the back end. So the effective leader will take care of the personal issues as well. He will make the call if there is a COVID going on. So people used to make calls during every week to their employees. So this is one of the things that effective leader will do. While the ineffective leader will have the lack of core values. He will not be listening you properly. He will not be proper listener. So an effective leader will be focusing on the goal that he would just want to have, and just look for the micromanagement kind of thing. So that is people don't like those kind of work people. So that is what I feel. Yeah, and my team member also felt the same things. Yeah.
Oh, Shailendra, thank you so much for sharing that. And if you had your hand up and you didn't get a chance to share with the whole group, please feel free to use the chat to tell us a little bit about your discussion. But I want to it was almost a perfect segue, Shailendra, to what we're about to talk about in self-awareness, and that is the identification of core values. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that it isn't so much that we follow leaders who have our exact same core values, but that we are more likely to trust someone when they know themselves and that they are communicating their insides on the outside. That makes
True.
someone trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you brought up this notion of values identification. And that takes us, I think, nicely into the next section. Of course, please continue your discussions and your analysis in the chat. If you have effective leaders or ineffective leaders that you'd like to share, please continue doing so. You heard us mention earlier, who you are is how you lead. And that's why it's fundamental for us when we offer this course on leadership in teams is to do so from the lens of the development of the self. And so how well do you know yourself? We're going to talk for just a few minutes about the work of Tasha Eurich, who is not only a best-selling author, but a coach and a consultant who has sort of built her career around deep research that she has done on the concept of self-awareness. So I want to discuss this self-awareness matrix, these types. I love me a good typology.
I mean, how can you not like a good
I know.
typology? It just organizes ideas for you.
It is. It
Great.
organizes our world, doesn't it? We offer to you that if you want to develop your leadership skills, your leadership potential, that starting with the self is where you're going to get your most bang for your buck. So Tasha Eurich defined self-awareness along these two dimensions. Internal self-awareness, how well do we know ourselves on the inside? How well do we know, Shailendra, our core values? If I asked you right now to name your core values, could you do that? 1, 2, 3. I feel you about to say something.
Oh no, I was just gonna.
Sometimes we do this.
So yeah, this is just us having a conversation.
Yes.
Now you know how we teach. Actually, I think that's a really good point. It's actually really hard, and it is something that if I think back to what I thought my values were, I think we learn what our values are, especially in times of struggle and when we observe ineffective leaders. I actually think we learn more about our values from working for someone who doesn't hold the values we would like to hold, as opposed to working for someone who does. I mean, you can make an argument for both sides. So
it's harder than it sounds, and it's intentional.
Yeah.
Core values work is very intentional. How well do we know our patterns? How well do we know our own personality? How well do we know our fit for environment? In other words, what places and spaces do we feel the most in our skin? So, in other words, internal self-awareness, shining that light on the inside. So that's a dimension from low to high. The other dimension, of course, is external self-awareness, which means how well do we know how other people see us? How accurate are we in knowing how well the rest of the world sees us? So when Eurich took these two dimensions, she originally hypothesized if I'm high in one, I'm probably going to be high in the other. So if I have high internal self-awareness, I probably have high external self-awareness. No, it turns out the research doesn't support that. So what falls out then statistically are these sort of 4 buckets, or this quadrant model, so that one can differentially be high or low in internal or external self-awareness. So just very quickly, and as I explain these, maybe think about your own self and where you might fall. So if we look at folks who are low in internal and low in external, so that's that bottom left corner, Eurich calls these folks seekers. So a lot of room for growth here in both a dive into the internal world, and then also seeking feedback and looking for feedback from the external world. If perhaps you're someone who is high in internal self-awareness, but maybe low in external self-awareness, so up there in that upper left corner, those folks are known as introspectors. So maybe you do spend a lot of time thinking about your values and your passions and your personality and your fit, and you're really comfy and cozy in there. And you're less likely to look on the outside for disconfirming evidence or for feedback, to know if you're projecting what you are, on the inside. So those folks are known as introspectors. I'm going to move to the third category, which is probably going to strike a nerve with some of you because it does for me. And that's someone who is generally high in external self-awareness. So they're very concerned with how the external world sees them, but maybe doesn't spend enough time on the inside exploring their own values, passions, and fit. And those folks are known as pleasers. So Professor Luckman knows that I'm a recovering pleaser.
And I am too.
When
we know we talk about it, we work through it. We're practicing. We're trying to move into the aware category.
That's right. So these are folks who are sort of by default concerned about the external world, but might do so at an expense to their internal world and may end up frustrated and resentful when things don't line up. And so then let's talk about the 10 to 15% of people that Urich found in her research that are actually self-aware. We might think we're self-aware, but it takes a lot of intention. And 10 to 15% are in the category of high internal and high external self-awareness. And she sometimes calls these folks unicorns because it's rare.
And one of my favorite findings about the unicorns is that they don't take feedback from everybody and they don't spend all of their time introspecting. So they have, even though they're high on both internal and external, they are very thoughtful about where the feedback comes from. That comes from loving critics. So they seek out people who are seeking to help them develop. Not every piece of feedback is always helpful, and not every piece of feedback is given to you in the right interest, right? And on the other hand, simply introspecting all the time has a limit. In fact, she talks about there's a downside to too much reflection because then it becomes rumination. So these unicorns actually find this beautiful balance between these two things, which I think is really interesting. I try to think about that a lot when I'm working on these things myself.
And it's difficult to find the loving critics, but essential to the development of self-awareness. So this is just a taste. If you'd like to learn more, there's a link you could sort of snap a picture of or copy down, and Tasha Urich's book, Insight. There's a quiz you can take if you're interested in more of that information, and we can drop that link in the chat. The reason we talk so much about self-awareness is that when you increase your level of self-awareness, all kinds of great things start to happen, like more confidence, more creativity, more effective communication, and you make sounder decisions. So let's move next and talk a little bit about effective decision-making and how that plays into our leadership.
So, I'm looking at all of these examples where you've talked about effective leaders, and I'm always struck by, a lot of us know what an effective leader is. We know we want to feel safe. We want to feel valued. We want trust. We know that we want an environment where we can speak our minds. So why is it that the leadership development industry is like a multi-billion-dollar industry and we can't figure this stuff out if we all know it? And it really comes down to, because we don't really spend enough time focusing on the role we're playing in the process. If you think about the world as complex systems, all of a sudden, every piece, every person, every relationship matters. And that's coming back to this whole idea of self-awareness. The way we make decisions, many of you are probably familiar with Kahneman and Tversky's work on behavioral economics. Yep, there it is. I'm glad. Thank you, Megan. Thinking fast and slow. That's where a lot of this comes from. And if we're taking time to learn our values and we're taking time to think about how we're seen by other people, it is also worth taking time thinking about how we react from an emotional intelligence perspective, as well as a cognitive intelligence perspective. What biases are we being affected by? Because we are all being affected by them all the time. And so there are a few here. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of them. You have probably seen many of these before, but I'll just share a couple of examples because I always just find these fascinating. There's a great game that we will often use in class to demonstrate the anchoring bias. And what we'll do is we will ask everybody in the class to write down the last, let's say, 3 digits of their phone number, right? So some people it's going to be 123, some people it's 786, so all kinds of different 3-digit numbers. Then we'll hold up some generic item, a man's blue shirt, a bottle of wine without a label on it, some item, and we'll ask everybody to guess what the price is. And every time there is a statistically significant difference based on what you wrote down of that 3-digit number. So if your phone number ended in 999, you were more likely to guess that shirt was worth more than someone whose last 3 digits were 111. These are not correlated in any way, shape, or form, but that's how our brains work. And so, yes, Range, another great book. Thank you, Mohammed. So that is a really interesting example of what our brain is doing when it anchors on something. Also, escalation of commitment, I think, is one that goes across our business projects, our life decisions. There are so many things where we can fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. Another great book, Annie Duke just published a book called Quit. Annie Duke was a professional poker player. So she'd start, I can't remember if she finished grad school, maybe she finished, and then she became a professional poker player, and since then has been writing all about decision making, and Quit is one of the best books I've ever read. Really tangible examples. So think about how we make decisions and the things that impact our decision making. If you come into work and you're in a bad mood because something terrible happened at home, that is going to impact how you show up and how your employees or your team members see you, right? If you're in a really good mood, that's going to impact it. So we have to be really aware of how we're bringing ourselves into work because it impacts how we interact with other folks. So this idea around making effective decisions really comes down to practice and awareness. And that's why we brought this all back to starting with the self and understanding how we're showing up in our lives. So I think we have another poll. I'm going to ask there we go. If you can move us to the next slide, please and thank you.
Buttons.
I know, lots of buttons. So now we're closing in on the end of our time together. By the way, normally we do have 90-minute live sessions, but for the sake of time, we're only taking 60 minutes of your time today. So we would do many of the same things, just in a slightly more expanded format. But we want to ask you this, Nicola, if you'd launch this, please. Now that we've given you a few things to play with, what are you going to practice? Are you going to focus on your internal self-awareness, external self-awareness, checking for bias in decision making, or simply reflecting on how you show up in leadership situations, or something else? And if you choose other, we ask that you tell us what that is in the chat. What are you working on this week?
I knew you were going to ask me
I know.
that. I was like, who was going to ask it first? Which is, it's interesting. Professor Luckman and I often talk about how we may be professors teaching this course on leadership in teams, but we're forever students of this material and of this practice. So these are practices that show up for us. I think I've been in a phase, where I've been working to increase my internal self-awareness. I've been trying to spend more time in nature. I've been trying to spend more time by myself and explore and reconnect with values work and sort of, thinking about future intentions. So that's my piece for right now is internal.
I love that.
What you?
Because it's the end of the semester, there's some really great research out there on something called fresh starts. Heng-Chen Dai, Katie Milkman are a couple of people that write in this area. And it turns out that we are highly influenced by starting over, right? Doesn't Monday feel like a new day of the week or the first day of the month, or why do we celebrate New Year's, right? So this idea of fresh starts, we can use that to help us create better practices and develop better habits. And so end of the semester is a really good time for me. I always sort of try to pause and take a step back and reflect on what am I proud of that I accomplished this semester? What did I do well? What areas do I feel like I fell short? And how am I going to close those gaps in the future? So I'm getting ready to do my post-semester reflection time. So we can move forward. Yeah. So let's, did we get some results? I wasn't paying attention. There we go. Thank you, Nicola. So it looks like reflecting on how you're showing up in leadership situations.
So 34%.
And I get the feeling, only 10% shows external self-awareness. I get the feeling a lot of people pleasers are out there.
I think it's common.
It tends to be a very cultural thing. I think that certain cultures really embed this.
It is, and I'm glad you all brought that up earlier in the chat. I noticed some question around cultural difference and self-awareness, which is something I believe Urich addresses in her research.
Yeah. And so this is one of the fun things it's one of the reasons that Professor Keating said, we are students of this ourselves, because this isn't some finite set of knowledge. leadership, you don't just acquire leadership knowledge and you're like, I got it all figured out, I'm good to go. We're always learning. Also, part of the reason for that is because there is no one answer, right? Every single situation is different. Every person is different. And yes, are there cultural differences and gender differences and age differences? Of course, but those are also at an average level that we see those, but you individually have your own set of differences you're bringing. And so this is why it's so important just to bring it back to really getting to know who you are and how you show up.
Thank you for sharing some of the recommended readings. I know that we've mentioned a lot of books and a lot of resources here just in this hour that we've shared together.
So see, Megan, you got it ahead of time. She was the one I think who said thinking fast
and
slow.
slow.
Right there,
Yeah, it's like you previewed that. So Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. Of course, a couple of pieces by Tasha Eurich, including her book Insight. Susan David, some of you may be familiar with, and all of her deep work around emotional agility and how emotions are data that help us understand the situation and who we are. And yes, if you continue to join classes or live sessions with Professor Luckman and me, you will find out that emotions absolutely belong in organizational life. They absolutely belong in the workplace because they're data to tell us how we're doing and how we can improve. Emotional Intelligence by David Walton. Please feel free to share other readings and book suggestions in the chat.
How do we not have any Brene Brown on our recommended reading list?
I think I ran out of room is what it was. But Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, of course, is foundational in this work. Megan,
I just finished another book that I'm going to suggest that's not directly related to leadership, but I believe you can learn leadership lessons anywhere. Rainn Wilson from The Office, just published this book called Soul Boom. And the whole book is about arguing for, like, we need spirituality more than ever. And so it's not a religious treatise. It's not an argument that people need to follow a specific religion. In fact, he argues that there is value in all of religion and spirituality, and he connects it to solving the world's problems, which is essentially what leaders do. And so it's also, if you listen to the audiobook, he's just a real joy to listen to anyway. It's entertaining. So yeah.
I like him from Monsters versus Aliens.
Quality work right there. I like that.
All right. And as we always do at the end of our live sessions, we like to sort of send folks off with a final thought or a quote that we feel sort of wraps up what we just discussed. And we'll leave you with this one today, although we have a few more minutes perhaps to drop some questions and answers in the chat. But from Sheryl Sandberg, we cannot change what we are not aware of. And once we are aware, we can't help but change. So just a thank you for spending this hour, for your thoughts in the chat, for your thoughts with each other and the rich discussion that you had that was hopefully enlightening, dare I say inspiring for the rest of your day or the balance of your week. Kate, we have just 3 or 4 or 5 minutes left. Should we move next to some Q&A?
Sure. If anyone has any questions, we can go ahead and just use the raise hand feature.
We'll take all the thank yous in the chat. Thank you all too.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And like Professor Keating said, thanks for engaging with us, but also just with each other. This is what you're going to get in the iDegrees programs. This is how you are going to be asked to engage with your peers and engage with your professors. So many of you may know that each class has its own MOOC or 2 MOOCs, depending on the link of the class. Those are massive open online courses through Coursera. So that is the foundation. We think of that as like the textbook of the course. And then in addition to that, you have live sessions, office hours, which is really fun. Our office hours, we call them leadership therapy sessions because that's essentially what they are. And really, we have a great platform for interacting with each other online, so you can have conversations online with folks. So there are a lot of different ways for you to engage through the iDegrees programs.
Perfect. It looks like one question from Goldfish, and then we will wrap it up after that.
Hi, my name is Mila, by the way. I was just wondering if you guys can share their book list, which was shared before. The book recommendation.
The slides are going to be shared, so they'll be on the slides. quit.
It
Annie
wasn't.
Duke quit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And huge thank you. It was inspirational.
Well, thank you, Mila. Thank you for joining
us.
Okay, one more, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I put it in the chat. I was just wondering, like, what time and zone are the live sessions usually offered so that we can think about incorporating that into our schedule?
So we have, what we try to do with each class is there are 2 to 3 live sessions, depending on the size of the course, and we try to cover a variety of time zones. So we usually have at least one in the morning Central Time and one in the evening Central Time. So for example, we'll have a 10 a.m. Central and then a 6 p.m. Central. If we have a third live session, we'll try to offer it on a different day, morning or evening. So there is a lot of intention around us organizing our live sessions so that people can join. Live sessions are also recorded. We love to have people join. We would much prefer to have people join. It's a lot of fun. But if you can't join 1 week, you can record them, or you can watch the recording as well.
Yeah, a lot of flexibility for folks, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I did see a question about assignments and readings. And so these vary by class quite a bit. For our class, I will tell you our readings are mostly like online articles. So they're easily accessible, they're free, they're open source. You can get a sense of this through our MOOCs, through our massive online open courses on Coursera. We have 2 primary high engagement assignments that we offer. One is a written leadership case study. So you actually write a case study based on a situation you faced, which is really cool because you get to do some real reflective work there, but you also get to work with other people. And you walk away with this very really cool piece of work that you've created. And then the other one is we have a simulation where you get to work collectively with a team to climb Mount Everest.
Yes.
And so that's our class. Other classes have different types of assignments based on, if it's a process management, there are problem sets. And if it's marketing, there are some fun sort of real world application examples as well.
All right, I think we are going to wrap up here, just to be mindful of everyone's time. I wanted to thank Professors Keating and Luckman. What a wonderful session on leading with empowerment. I hope everyone really enjoyed this live class experience, which, as we've talked about, this would be just like one of the live classes that you would experience within Geese Online programs. Thank you to all of our participants today. You guys brought some excellent questions and the chat was just lit up today. It was super fun. If you're interested in applying to one of our credentials that we offer, May 4th is our first priority 1 deadline coming up to apply to a graduate certificate or the IMBA, IMSA, or IMSM programs for a fall start this August. We would love to meet with you and discuss your career goals and how Geese Business can help you reach those goals. So feel free to reach out to us, geeseonline@illinois.edu. There's this QR code again. And again, thank you to Professor Luckman and Professor Keating. This was such a great session. I hope everyone has a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are joining us from. Have a good one.